Hi everyone, welcome to the channel Pharma Focus. I hope you guys are doing really great. This video today is going to be the continuation of the series, which we have an introductory video about the ICH E2 guidelines. So we are going to discuss and start with the ICH E2A guidelines today. So before we begin, I would like to clarify here that this video is created only for the educational purposes and I'm not affiliated with or representing ICH. The content shared here is based on my understanding and the public information that is already available to everyone, and it is just the interpretation of ICH E2A guidelines that can help to better understand the concepts. So yeah, before we head on to ICH E2A guidelines, let's explore from where we can get into it. So this is ICH.org, the website, and you can go to the efficacy guidelines. Under this, there is this section E2A to E2F, which is clinical safety data management, and we are going to discuss about E2A guidelines, clinical safety data management, definitions and standards for expedited reporting. So once you click on it, you get this guideline as a PDF here, and you can easily download it from here and you can read it out and learn it from here. Alright, so this is one of the major topics you should be knowing about the regulatory guidelines, or this is a kind of a skill that you should be knowing if you wish to enter PV as a professional. Alright, so this ICH E2A guideline is about clinical safety data management, definitions and standards for expedited reporting. So let's start with it. So I've highlighted few of the points here in this section about the introduction. Overall, you can just go through the guideline by yourself only, but I would like to summarize some of the introduction over here because that's a lot of text and I can't read up all of that in a short video. So about the introduction, if we talk, then we have clinical trials, and it is very important that the safety information about the drug, it is collected and reported in the same way everywhere, right? And this is the reason there are good clinical practice standards to ensure that there are same definitions, terms, procedures, that the safety data, it is consistent and reliable. So what is mentioned here is about the SIOMS 1 and SIOMS 2 working groups, that they have already undertaken the initiatives for marketed medicines, right? But the drugs that are still being developed, they are very different. Why they are different is because we have the reasons here. That is, there is less safety information available and they are still being tested in the clinical trial phases, phase 1, 2 and 3. Also, when a drug is approved in one country but it is still in clinical trials in another country, because of this, the safety data from the marketed use should also be shared with the regulators where the drug is still under the investigation. So that tells us that it is both practical and well advised to regard pre-marketing and post-marketing clinical safety reporting concepts and practices as interdependent, while recognizing the responsibility for clinical safety within regulatory bodies. Companies may reside with different departments depending on the status of product, that is investigational, which is still under the development, which is a clinical trial drug, and the marketed drug, which is already on the market, that is a post-marketing surveillance drug. So there are two issues within the broad subject of clinical safety data management that are appropriate for harmonization at this time. First is creating a standard definition and terminologies for clinical safety reporting. And second is creating a system for rapid reporting of expedited, that means usually the serious safety issues during the clinical trials. So this provision of the guideline is used in conjunction with other ICH GCP guidelines. And now we are going to explore in this video about some of the important definitions. But before that, if we know what clinical safety information is, then it is the data which is particularly related to the adverse effects, risks, safety concerns of a drug during the clinical trials, right? And then we have clinical development. So you must know about the various phases of clinical trials, what clinical trials are. Then the good clinical practices are the kind of the international standards that ensure that the clinical trials, they are ethical and they are scientifically valid. Then we have a pre-marketing phase here, which we talked about here, which is the time before the drug is approved, the clinical trials, and the post-marketing phase, which is the time after the drug is approved and sold in the market. And we have a term here which is expedited rapid reporting, which is generally in relation to the rapid reporting of serious safety events to the regulators during the clinical trials. And this generally involves the SUSAR reporting, which is within 7 or 15 days. So this is a kind of a regulatory timeline which is followed. So for 7 days, we need to have the SUSAR cases in which we have either fatal or the life-threatening adverse event, and the ones which do not have these kind of any criterias but they are serious, they have to be reported within the 15-day timeline. And then we have here investigational product, which is again the drug that is still being studied in the clinical trials and it is not yet approved. And regulatory authorities, we all know that the organizations that monitor all of these things, so they can be, the examples can be US FDA, EMA, Health Canada, or any other regulatory authority that is working in any part of the world that is in relation to that. Okay. So now this section is about the definitions and the terminology which is associated with the clinical safety experience, right? So we are going to discuss about the basic terms here. So the core terms that you need to know when reporting and analyzing the safety data, though, so these are a must know things, right? So I'm going straight to the adverse event or the adverse experience. Any untoward medical occurrence in a patient or a clinical investigation subject administered a pharmaceutical product and which does not necessarily have a causal relationship with this treatment. So any unwanted medical problem that happens in a person, in a patient, in a clinical investigation subject. So the clinical investigation subject is someone who is used as a subject under the clinical trial, right? If they are administered with the pharmaceutical product, then any kind of untoward medical occurrence is the adverse event. Second major point in this section in adverse event definition is that it does not necessarily have a causal relationship with this treatment, which is the point which differentiates it from the adverse drug reaction term, right? And it can be it is any unfavorable unintended sign. It can be including any abnormal laboratory finding, for example a symptom, disease which is temporarily associated with the use of medicinal product, whether or not considered related to the medicinal product. So by the term which is mentioned here, temporarily associated with the use of medicinal product, this refers to something where there is a temporal association, where we know that the taking of the drug, the suspect drug, and the start of the adverse event, they come in a proper specific time range. The symptom or the disease, anything that is happening after taking the drug, it is in a perfect time range. That is, it is, let's say, happening after the intake of that particular medicinal product. Another thing that we have is adverse drug reaction. So all noxious unintended responses to the medicinal product related to any dose should be considered as the adverse drug reactions. So what major thing do we have here is the phrase responses to the medicinal product. It means that a causal relationship between the medicinal product and adverse event is at least a reasonable possibility. That is, a relationship cannot be ruled out. So that is what differentiates adverse event and adverse drug reaction, right? Adverse drug reaction is something in which there is a causal relationship between the medicinal product and an adverse event. Again, we have this definition as per WHO, which is a response to a drug which is noxious and unintended and which occurs at the doses normally used in the man for prophylaxis, diagnosis or therapy of the disease or for modification of physiological function, right? So this is the another definition by WHO, means the same thing. Okay, so we have another point here, which is unexpected drug reaction. So an adverse reaction, the nature or severity of which is not in consistency with the applicable product information, investigator brochure for an unapproved investigational medicinal product. Alright, so when we look at this definition, we have a few things here, the nature and the severity first. Not consistent with what? With the applicable product information, right? And one is adverse reaction. So majorly we are talking about an adverse reaction whose nature or severity, it is not in consistency with the applicable product information. Now what this applicable product information is, that is the major question here. So since this is written in the case of investigator brochure for an unapproved investigational medicinal product, investigational product is the one which is under clinical trials, right? It is not something which is on the market. For it, there is this document, investigator brochure. So investigator brochure is the product information regulatory document that helps us to check for this information to analyze if the nature or the severity of the adverse reaction that any subject or any patient is experiencing is in consistency with this document or not. And this is for the unapproved investigational medicinal product. So when we talk about this term in regard to the marketed products, there is a difference in the document that we check for in regard to, and also there is a kind of a separate term which is used for the marketed products. So let me summarize all of the things that we discussed. An adverse event, which is any negative, any untoward medical occurrence, in which the major thing is, regardless of the cause, does not necessarily have a causal relationship. Adverse drug reaction is something in which there is a reasonable possibility that the drug and the adverse event, they are linked. Then we have we discussed the last part already. I think that covers up at least these three basic terms, and this is enough for this video. I'll be covering up the coming part in the next video. I hope you guys find this video useful. If you want me to keep making such videos in near future, do give it a thumbs up and keep liking the videos, subscribe to the channel so that it just gives me a boost up to make some more good videos for everyone. Thank you so much for watching.